We see evidence of organization in the attack themselves. In the attack on Kiamba, the witness testified of what may be described in military terms as a pincer movement. They're in the middle with at the church. One group comes from this side, another group comes from that side, and traps the victims in the grips of this pincer movement. We see another witness, for instance, witness 508. I won't read it, but it's pages 216 and 217 of the Book of Extracts, who describes a movement of 3 groups of 50 to 100 people. And he describes how these groups take turns. They'll retreat to the top of a hill, one group will come down and attack, that group will then retreat, the next group will come down and attack, and following like this. Clearly, there is coordination between these groups to, as a whole, create an effective attack. And then we have similar patterns of attacks in various areas, such as the preceding of the Nduru, the war cries that precede the various attacks. And let me go to one or two of these, maybe in a little bit of greater detail. Time simply doesn't permit me to go through all of them, but let's perhaps look at the evidence of at page 256.
Before you proceed and you say, we will get to the Nduru, but again, it's your view or your position that all these would preclude the mobilization of political thugs already formed and trained for political thuggery purposes in place to be sprung into action for this sort of thing, assuming the Chamber accepts the evidence of the primary fact to begin with.
Your Honours, what I'm referring to at the moment is evidence of organization. By whom that organization is, one then has to look. Alone mean that this is part of the network's common plan, etc. There is the further step then of connecting the persons involved, who are identified as being involved with this, with the network and with the preparation meetings, which is why I commenced by going with the preparation meetings, the implementation meetings, the training, which is linked in various ways to the network and to ultimately the accused. And in support of that, by putting up more objective evidence, one might say, of actual crime-based witnesses to the attacks, it's a feature which supports the fact that this was organized, and together with the other evidence, we say proves it was organized by the network.
Thank you. So before I stopped you, you were beginning to give examples of the pattern.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. The first witness I'll refer to is at tab 18. And if I can ask for page 256 to be pulled up, it's 3 to 18. I think I can read this out in public session. Bear with me. This is a description of the attack at Kiamba. The witness was asked to describe the attackers, and at line 3, the witness says, "Some of them were wearing leaves. Others had a piece of cloth on their faces. Others were bearing traditional weapons such as machetes, axes, and sticks." And what sort of clothing were they wearing? Most of them were wearing clothing of a khaki color, while others tied pieces of cloth around their heads. The question, were the attackers disguised in any way? Answer, yes. They had painted themselves in such a way that it was difficult to recognize their faces, even if one came close to them. From line 13, they painted themselves with whitewash, black or rather white clay. At line 15, As I explained to you earlier, their leaders had some cloth or fabric tied around their heads, but the youth who were attacking had painted themselves with white clay. She later goes on to explain that the fabric was referred to as, or she was referring to, was bandanas. Disguise that we see described by in the training by one of the previous witnesses training in at a certain area I don't think I mentioned in public. Did I? Your Honours, on this point, we have looked for images of the warriors disguised in this way, and from what we can see, there's nothing on record that's actually been admitted. There is a certain video, portions of which were put to certain witnesses, and another portion of the video, which is not referred to in evidence. We see some people who may or may not be warriors, but that is not, as far as I'm concerned, in evidence, and the prosecution can't rely on it at this stage.
Not even in your opening statements did you show images?
Your Honours, I've checked. We've showed images of the burnt Kiama church. We've showed images of speeches and where Mr. Ruto was crowned as king or spokesperson of the Kalenjin, and we've showed images of IDP camps, but nowhere can I see images of warriors.
Thank you very much, Mr. Steinberg. Proceed, please.
Moving on then to just to deal with issues such as logistical support.
Maybe that tells us why we should not be reading magazines and newspapers about what goes on in the world. Maybe.
It's sometimes difficult to... And again, there youths being ferried on lorries of different sizes from Kalenjin areas to the site of the attacks, and I refer to only one or two here. So, for instance, crime-based witness 487, it's at page 186 of the Book of Extracts, line 22 to page 188. I think I said 182, where the date is given of the 31st of December, and then on the following page, 187, the witness mentioned that approximately 5 or 6 in the morning, from line 5, lorries are described as one was white and the other was creamish, like this color on the wall. At line 20, there were passengers in both lorries. Over the page, there were 40 or 50 each. They were men, and at the end of the page, she describes it as being Kalenjin men. Shortly after that, at about 8 o'clock, page 189, the witness testifies seeing Kalenjin youth forming around the upper area in the vicinity she was talking about, or he was talking about, rather. One other instance, witness 189, at page 11 of the record. Lines 1 to 17 speaks about 100, 200 people in lorries. Line 4, we can't call it a truck, we can't call it a bus. They are medium lorries which are used to carry and ferry things. Line 9, now you said, witness, that the people, that were on these lorries were painted with chalk. What can you tell us? Are you speaking about their face, or where was the chalk exactly? At line 12, their faces, their hair, it's white. At line 16, can you tell us what ethnic group these people were? They were Kalenjins. They were shouting, the Kalenjin voices, and she then goes to explain violence that occurred subsequent to that in the area, burning and looting. Those are just two examples. There are a number of more. They are set out firstly in the tables we provided to the Book of Extract, and secondly in more detail in the prosecution's responses to the no case to answer motions. As to food, one witness, important witness here is witness 508, and I refer to page 222 of the record. And this is the witness who described the Kalenjin youth attacking let's find the relevant page. And perhaps I should actually just start there. Let me just start there because I've mentioned that already. At page 216, lines 15 to 18, he describes three groups sitting in three positions. Some were sitting at number 1, location number 1, a group of between 50 and 100. Others at location 5, a group of almost the same number of people, and the others at position number 6 on top of the hill. At the next page from line 15, the question is, before the break, you said the Kalenjin would be instructed to go down to the different locations. My question is, instructed by whom? The answer is, the movements show that there was somebody in control, either through a phone or signal that we could not understand, because no group would move from location 1 to any other place while the other group is on the move. There's only one group which would move, the other two are waiting. When one is done with, another group would go down. The system would mean somebody was either in control or a phone was being used. The same witness then goes to discuss the feeding of these warriors at page 222. And the person there, an elder in the area whose name I won't mention in public session, from line 3. On the day of the attacks that you just described, do you know whether Mr. So-and-so had any role? The role I know, the role he played was the feeding the warriors when they were attacking us. How do you know that? Because after all the fighting, every group would go there, get their feeding, and then go back to their position. From there on, it will be just go there, get their food, and then return to their positions. That's what was happening. And then the witness confirms that these were the Kalenjin warriors, and he witnessed them being fed. Witness 613 similarly talks about working at a feeding station for the Kalenjin warriors, and some of the other Rule 68 witnesses also talk about the feeding of the warriors. Clearly, these are a large number of peoples that have they could not continue with the fight unless they had the sustenance to keep them going over an extended period. We've spoken about petrol being distributed by youth on motorbikes. I won't go back to that. As for intelligence, I mentioned earlier about the Marakwet man with the paper pointing out the houses of Kikuyu people, and that was in the evidence of witness who appears at tab 21. Then there's the evidence of witness 396, I won't read out, who concluded that the attackers, the Kalenjin youth, were not from his area because on seeing the corpses of 3 of the Kalenjin youth who had been killed in the fighting, he did not recognize them as being from that area. And he described how a local person by the name of Joseph Sang was directing the attackers which houses belong to the Kikuyu and which houses should be attacked. Another witness describes how she was hiding in the bush and saw attackers with pieces of paper pointing out houses and attacking houses. There are several examples of that, and I don't think I need to go into all of those. I've dealt with the inherent organized nature of the attacks. The similar nature of the attacks, we've heard from a number of people how shortly after the election results, these nduru were sounded. There have been certain witnesses who have also mentioned that local Kikuyu who were under attack had been making an alarm sound to basically raise the hue and cry that they were under attack. So it's not to say that every cry is necessarily linked to to an attack, but there's certainly in prosecution submission sufficient examples of attacks being preceded by these nduru or war cries to draw the conclusion that this was a similar pattern of attack that happened in various areas.
But you see, right there, you say similar pattern of attack, but you also say, and then you say, when you say similar pattern, it shows evidence of the system, you say. But you also say that the local Kikuyus who would have also uttered the nduru, raising hue and cry, or SOS, or emergency alarm, so to speak. How do we begin to separate one from the other? One type of use of the nduru that the local Kikuyus would have uttered versus a similar pattern, hence the organized nature. Have any evidence that even in those instances where the evidence indicated that the nduru was used for the sinister purpose of marking the commencement of an attack, that those who uttered the nduru were affiliated to the network or working on behalf of the network? What does the evidence tell us as to that?
Your Honours, I think perhaps after the next break I might have to come back and point to specific areas. What I would say, though, is that the feature of the nduru is not something which standing alone is sufficient to demonstrate organization or to demonstrate a link to the network. The link to the network is demonstrated by the evidence I've already provided as to the preparatory meetings and the involvement of persons in the attacks at certain areas. Remembering that at this stage it's not necessary for the prosecution to prove the attacks in all of the charged locations, but only in one location per charge, according to the Chamber's findings. But if I may return to that question, I think after the break, I think rather than searching through it in the face of the court, it might be better if I identify those otherwise.
Fair enough.
Turning then to a couple of ex post facto indicators of organization, common plan. Firstly, I'd like to refer to, and some of this I might have to do in private session because it is identifying, but that is punishment which is meted out to various Kalenjin PNU supporters by Kalenjin elders and what's referred to by some witnesses as the Nandi Tribunal, some of which I've already dealt with. The witness at tab number 16, whose evidence of the events at the certain compound in Besiabo has already described how he was forced to attend this meeting and to account for his actions before the Kalenjin elders, and was ultimately fined and punished. I'd like to refer then also to the witness who appears at tab 7. And if I can ask that page 98 of the Book of Extracts is called up, please, from paragraph 105. I'm just having a quick look to see whether I can deal with this in public session. I think I can carefully. I won't mention then the location. When the witness arrived at the certain location, he was identified as a PNU member who had been brought to a Nandi tribunal. He was given two choices: to be killed or to give up his farm. He was then asked various questions about supporting the PNU when he wasn't Kikuyu. He was angrily accused. He then apologized for doing something wrong. He said he didn't know it would end up in violence and Nandi would be killing the Kikuyu, and said if he'd known this, he would not have accepted to be a PNU agent, etc. Christopher Casorio was in charge here, and another member of the committee was also the same Mr. Solomon Tilawen or Tirop. I don't want to read anything more out in public session, but it's another instance of a Kalenjin PNU supporter being punished. Another example is the witness at tab number 19. I refer to the Book of Evidence, page 297. From paragraph 170, where the witness describes how he and another PNU supporter, who we also see at tab number 22, were brought before the Kalenjin elders and accused of being PNU supporters. Certain persons wanted to kill them, but ultimately they were let off by being fined certain pieces of livestock. So at least 4 of the witnesses were subjected to this trial, basically accused of being traitors of the Kalenjin people and punished, showing, we submit, and the people taking part in this were, inter alia, 2 of the key network members, Mr. Casoria and Mr. Tirop, showing, we say, the connection between these tribunals and the network. Secondly, I want to refer to a certain ceremony that was conducted after the elections, and I refer to the witness at tab 24, at page 469 of the Book of Extracts. The court will bear with you one moment.
Let's one question for you before you get to the ceremony. Here you've referred to instances of where certain persons who were members of the opposing party were, to use court language, arraigned before what you call the Kalenjin tribunal. can you, what did you say the charges against them were before this tribunal?
If it were in fact a court of law, I suppose the charge would be one of treason.
You use the word Calendian tribunal, but you know my point.
Yes,
What,
I think
what was it say that they did? Was it that they did not support a political party and vote according to the endorsement of the community? Or was it because they had failed to participate in post-election violence?
Your Honour, predominantly the former.
What does the evidence say about that?
The evidence as a whole establishes several features. It establishes, on the one hand, starting from Mr. Ruto's authority in the Kalenjin community, that he was elected as either variously described as king, spokesperson, ultimate leader of the Kalenjin people, that he spoke for the Kalenjin people. Witnesses have testified that people who go against this are considered to be traitors. The decision was taken and saying that the Kalenjin were supporting Mr. Ruto and the ODM. People that went against this and supported the opposition party were considered traitors. It was considered that the PNU was a Kikuyu party, and to support the PNU was to be a traitor to the Kalenjin people. That is the picture which emerges, we say, from the evidence.
But does it go as far then as to say that because you are Kalenjin and we say all Kalenjins must support Mr. Ruto and the ODM, we are punishing you for that? But beyond that, what we meant by supporting the ODM and Mr. Ruto is that everyone must participate in post-election violence, and since you didn't, we're also punishing you for that. I'm trying to see whether the evidence tells us that in relation to the proceedings, so to speak, of this tribunal.
Your Honours, I wouldn't necessarily go as far as that. I think they were being punished for being PNU supporters. There is evidence to the effect that in certain areas, youth were being pressed into joining in the violence. One of those was, I believe, witness at tab 21, witness 658, I think I can say that. And there were others who were taken from their houses and forced to participate in the violence. And it seemed to be an expectation for Kalenjin youth of fighting age, if I might say that they should take part and participate in the violence. But I don't think we can go so far as to say that they were being punished for not participating in the violence. We saw with the witness at tab 16, after he was arraigned before the elders and punished, he was then handed over to the leader of the group youth and told, right, you now go with them and participate. But it's not the prosecution's case that they were necessarily being punished for not participating in the violence. Rather, the fact that is that the common plan, as it's articulated by the prosecution, is to rid the Rift Valley of PNU supporters, be they Kikuyu or Kalenjin, but that those Kalenjin supporters were given an opportunity to re-enter the fold, as it were, by apologizing, paying some sort of fine, and where necessary then carrying on to participate in what the rest of the youth were doing.
And that takes us to the ceremony.
It also takes us, I believe, to the afternoon break.
At our break point. But when we come back, you'll then deal with the ceremony. Is that it? All right. At this stage, we will rise for 30 minutes for our afternoon break.
All rise. We will wait.